Nope. No, I don't want that. I want, there we go. That's good. What do we got here? But it doesn't give me, oh yeah, beautiful. I got what I need on Michigan's site.
That's what I like to hear. Well,
Yeah.
don't like to hear that, but that's just the way Michigan State is.
Well, if it, hey, whatever works, right?
Is this thing? All right.
Offensive rebounding.
Oh, I
I
know.
mean, it got inflated a little bit late, but I also think that was, well, we'll talk about it. I
Yeah,
won't
exactly.
save any of the gems for
Right. Hey, everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod coming to you live after the first meeting between Michigan State and MSU and U of M on the road tonight, where Michigan State won 75-62 over the Wolverines in Ann Arbor. Before we begin our discussion, just a quick thanks to Matt First, who sent a very generous donation via Venmo. We appreciate the support, Matt. Go green. Okay, Rod, so this week was notable for, first, me surviving the flu, two, Michigan State beating Purdue to move into sole possession of second place and essentially knocking Purdue out of the race for the Big Ten, and leading to this big matchup against Michigan on Friday night to determine who would end up in ultimately in first place in the Big Ten. And most importantly, I think if you listen really carefully, you can hear a lawnmower going to work in Ann Arbor. I
that's
think
exactly right.
MSU is mowing the grass. They're taking care of
Exactly
business.
right.
So great win for Michigan State. They're down four at half in kind of, I'll say it was sort of a semi-disaster for end of the first half. I mean, the last 10 to 14 minutes or so of that half it was just terrible.
I would
But
divide.
despite
I
that,
would
they're only down four.
let me
And then they
stop
came
you
out,
there. Let me stop
well,
you there for a second because
okay.
I'm gonna differ with that just a little bit. I think it was bordering on that when they went down eight
Yeah.
and it was looking bad. Then they had a really good close. Booker hit a three fairly late. Jace drew a foul, hit those two free throws to get it down to three. And then for some reason, Jeremy Fears. Now, apparently, he didn't think he touched Kason, but
Yeah.
I
But you
don't know
kind of,
why he was even doing what he was doing if he
well, that's just
didn't.
the thing, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It looked, for all the world, it looked like a foul you would give, and they weren't just in the bonus; they were in the double bonus. I was
No.
just, I probably about 4 or 5 times watching it. I'm just saying to the screen, why? So that was kind of disastrous. I would agree with you. It kind of got there, but at the same time, they stayed in touch, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, and I think when I say disaster, in the sense that like kind of everything Michigan State what had to not do, they struggled a little bit against the zone. They turned the ball over a ton. They weren't able to do quite as much in the offensive boards, especially in the late half of the first
Yeah.
half. So then they came out in the second half and dominated Michigan for a while. Um, and then it sort of kind of played even for a bit, just and then sort of just as we saw in Champaign, the last end of that second half, they just put their foot on the throat of Michigan. They stopped. Michigan didn't score in the last 4 minutes, 12 seconds, I think. It looked like the Wolverines, much like we saw with Illinois and to some extent Purdue, just had nothing left in the tank at the end of the game. I mean, they looked like just a crippled, beat team. And Michigan State was working with a fairly comfortable margin. And I was telling you before we went on there, it never felt comfortable to me, just because this game felt a lot like a tournament game. It in the sense that it's like the first really big game that they've had, I think, where a lot was on the line. Like I think they've had games early this season which were, important, certainly, like, Illinois at home initially kind of get things rolling, or Purdue. But this one really felt like, it was going to define where the rest of the regular season was going to go. And I think now we have an idea what it's going to be like. And so it felt that big to me. It obviously wasn't the finality of like an NCAA tournament game where it's just, the season's over if you lose, but it kind of felt like that way as far as the Big Ten race went for Michigan State. And maybe that's not totally realistic, but I think that's at least how it felt to me. And
No, I
it
don't. I
did.
don't. I don't disagree with that. The only thing I disagree with was at what point I started celebrating. I was
Right.
celebrating maybe a little bit earlier than you,
You're far more
but
confident
I
than me.
agree. I agree with your characterization, and I entirely agree with your characterization of the importance of the game. And we talked about it in the preview, right? That
Yeah.
this was the first time since 2019 that we had a Michigan State game like this, and odds are pretty good. The season finale at Breslin is going to be some version that's very similar.
Yeah.
Whether they're still 1 and 2 remains to be seen. because both teams have some challenging games left on their dockets, but before they get to that one. But yeah, I for those of our listeners who aren't Spartan Mag members, every Sunday night I think every week since Big Ten play started back up in January, except for the week we were in LA, I've done a post where I sort of do a state of the Big Ten reset of what's happened that week, where teams are, and I divide them into tiers, usually four tiers, and then kind of set the table for what's coming for each of those teams the following week. And in Michigan State's part of that, I said, and this was before the Purdue game, if they can sweep this week, they're going to be in it to the finish line.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they've won it, but they're going to be in it until the last game of the season. If they hadn't swept, if they'd lost this one, that wouldn't necessarily mean they had no shot to stay in it, but it would have been tough because you'd have four games left. You're then two back of Michigan in the loss column. Plus, you've got the road game at Maryland, the home game with Wisconsin, and oh, by the way, another home game with Michigan, as well as a road game at Iowa
Yeah.
left in your schedule. Tough, even with the remaining game against Michigan at home, tough to make up two. Not
Yeah. With that
impossible, but
schedule, for sure.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, but difficult. Now, not only have you put yourself with four to play in the driver's seat, which they are literally, they're in first
Mm-hmm.
by a half game, but uh, I think you've given, and I don't want to look, they all matter, and you want to get them all, but I think they've given themselves room for one slip up. They've given themselves just that much wiggle room that they did not have before if they had lost this game, would not have had, in my
Right.
opinion, at least. And I say that because, look, they're all challenging in their own way, right? Even the game at Iowa, with the way they could shoot the three, you get them on the wrong night. You could find, even with them depleted and not having a great year, you get them on the wrong night, you could have a fight on your hands.
Yeah.
Um, but the game that really obviously looks daunting at the moment of a four-game stretch that's pretty daunting in general is the one at Maryland because of
Right. The next
the,
game.
the
Yeah.
way Maryland's been playing and at home. And, they've still got a lot to play for, too. Even besides NCAA tournament seeding, they're very much in the mix for a top four finish and a double bye in the Big Ten tournament,
Right.
which does matter. You want that extra day of rest if you can get it. And so just for the sake of kind of recharging your batteries going into the NCAA tournament, I think it matters. So that one is that is the one that strikes me of the four remaining as the toughest of a tough batch. If you'd lost this one, boy, then you've really got to look at it and say we got to go 4-0
Yeah.
to
For sure.
finish. Now I feel like they could afford a 3-1. Don't want it. Want a 4-0 because if you do, now seeding starts to get interesting for
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State. I don't want to go too far down that road, but I'm just saying if you win the Big Ten, and especially if you close it in a flurry, you got a chance. If you're
For,
Michigan State, you got a chance to maybe. Well, we're going to have Dom on, our friend
yeah.
Dom,
At some
who
point.
is one of the leading bracketologists nationally, and we'll see what he thinks, and we'll probably have a little more data by the point we get to that as well. But I want to say there's a world where it's not impossible for Michigan State to get to the two line.
I think it's very reasonable. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you look at I mean, three of the next four games are quad one. And
Yep.
actually, I was probably
Probably
quad one
all
because it's on the
four with
road.
it being a road game, right?
Yeah. So, and then you got, depending on the Big Ten tournament, you may get another one there
Right.
early
More
on,
quad,
possibly.
more quad one games. Yes.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
So
I mean,
it all matters, but
mhm.
the thing we're all focused on right now, and rightly so, is a Big Ten regular season title. Which, as much as I like the Big Ten tournament as an event, and I think it has grown in significance as we've moved to this unbalanced schedule,
Whatever it is.
one play dominant world.
Yeah.
Um, I'm look, somebody of my generation. the Big Ten regular season title still means something if you can get it.
Yeah.
You want that, and I know Tom Izzo wants it. So this was a big one in that, and then that's all aside from all the usual nonsense. You got Michigan. They'll always be riding high with a first year coach in any sport. We know that. That's a
Hmm.
given. The delusions of grandeur, all of that, it goes along with everything their athletic department and their screwed up fan base is about. But the fact that Dusty May has them in first heading into this game,
Yeah.
that they're also probably feeling pretty good because he signed an extension today,
Hmm.
apparently. And just a little side note for Michigan fans, unless that contract says he can't go to Indiana, that's not over, by the way. But be that as it may. So they're feeling great. They got their guy, their new hero. Somebody's finally gonna slay the Izzo dragon. Not so fast. And I think that's obviously a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to beat them on their home court on a night where, it's interesting watching the broadcast in the lower bowl. It seemed like they really packed it out with
Yeah.
Michigan fans, right? But the broadcast team was commenting late when the "Go Green, Go White" chant started. They're
Hmm.
like, "Ooh, looks like they let a few more in than we thought." So hats off to the Michigan State people that subjected themselves to that and willingly went to that place. But they got treated to a very, very enjoyable result and a night I'm sure they're going to remember. A lot of highlights, a lot of great plays made by a lot of different guys from Michigan State, and just a huge win all the way around. You
Yeah.
can't say it any more succinctly than that.
Yeah. I mean, had they been playing this game against any other team for first place, it still would have been like a big game. But the fact that it was at Michigan at
Yeah,
Chrysler definitely
exactly.
felt like a bigger episode. And hats off in some respects to Michigan. I mean, that was a really great crowd, and they don't always have great crowds, and so it was
No,
really impressive atmosphere there.
but
I wonder
it's
if all those Michigan State fans got those what are those cowboy hats with the yellow? If that were those just for the students in the lower bowl, I'm not sure how they were.
it's typical. Look,
I got a wristband when I went last year, so
yeah, I would even say this is true to some extent with their football crowd, but more so with basketball. It's a front running. It's the definition
yeah,
of a
right.
front running fan base. Even then, though, and I think this goes to your point, even when they're good, that doesn't automatically mean they'll have a great crowd. And I'm with you. I thought they had they had a pretty live crowd, better than the vast majority of Michigan State games I've seen in that building over a
Hmm.
long period of time. They were into it, and I thought Michigan. Well, we could talk about it as we go, but I thought that Michigan. I guess I want to return to a point you made about what we've seen in these last three games, tonight included.
Oh, the fatigue issue and possibly,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
Michigan, I
I think it was
thought
real.
played, yeah. Michigan played hard,
Hmm.
and I thought they played with physicality. I thought they were hanging in there against Michigan State's physicality for a good portion of that game. But as you noted, down the stretch against Purdue, down the stretch against Illinois, and down the stretch tonight, Michigan State wore them down. And, it's been a long time since I can recall seeing Michigan State do it in quite this way. That used to be the formula during the early stages of Tom Izzo's tenure at Michigan State.
Hmm.
They would say, we're going to keep trading body blows for 30 minutes, and then the last 10 minutes are ours because we're going to be fresher, because we play a bigger rotation. We rotate more, we're deeper, and we're in better condition, and we're tougher, we're stronger. Um, and I'm not saying Michigan State never did that in subsequent years. They did at times, but this team really is it's not exactly the same style because you can't play the same way that team did. The rules are
Right.
different now.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
do think the effect, we are really starting to see it. I think you're absolutely right to zero in on that. That you look at these last three games and man, opponents are just they're pulling the Roberto Duran no mas in the last like 5 minutes. They just don't have anything left in the tank. And that's the reason why you're seeing Michigan State go on these. I think you said it. Were they scoreless for the last four something?
4-12, and actually they only had like 1 point the last maybe 7 minutes or so. I think I'm not exactly sure. I don't have it in front of me, but it was
Illinois was
66
score,
60 66 to 61 or something, or maybe 66-60. I don't know. They did.
but
Yeah, but Illinois was a 15 to -2 run, right? To close
right
out that
over the
game, eight
last
minutes,
8 minutes.
eight and some
Right,
change. Yeah.
Purdue. It wasn't quite that drastic, but it was similar.
But they looked beaten. Like, they just looked like
Yeah,
a broken team at the end. Yeah.
yeah, and that's not by accident, people. That's happening because Michigan State plays 10 guys. So the next time you're frustrated about Xavier Booker getting a turn, or, oh, how can they play Carson Cooper this many minutes, or why is Jeremy Fears out there? Understand it is part of the equation. And you are seeing it, if you're paying attention, you are seeing it evidenced in the latter stages of these games, why that's important and why Tom Izzo is going to continue to do it. And
Yeah.
he should.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it clearly works. And I would say at the end of the season, it's definitely, you see, I don't feel like we noticed as much earlier in the season, but I think now teams, as they get a little bit
Yeah,
more worn down through the season, it is more dramatic. You see at the end of the game. It just, I mean, because, you've got these guys, 10 guys playing full tilt versus 8 guys, and it makes a big difference, especially when there's not a huge drop off, a gigantic drop off.
right.
And I would say too, and I know we talk about the physical fatigue of just, running up and down the court and battling and stuff like that, but there's a mental part too. And I think with Michigan State, the additional part of that I don't think we probably appreciate much, or at least I don't think about it too a whole lot, is from a scouting standpoint. If you're the opponent, you've got 10 guys who they all do different things. Like, you and I watch all the games, so we're like, we know, okay, this is going to be a rim roll for Cooper. That's what he does all the time. But you don't see Kohler do that, for instance. But if you're in the defense, you've got to try and remember who you're guarding all the time and what sort of their tendencies are. And they're 10 guys who can kind of like hurt you in different ways. So it makes it really challenging, I think, from a mental standpoint, especially when you get tired, to try and do the right thing and play good defense.
Okay, that's all really interesting stuff, and I want to drill down on that just a little bit. I actually watched um, not only Dusty May, and I can't remember the name of one of his assistants who did a press conference earlier this week, but they talked to a few of their players, and I think it was Vlad Golden who they asked about the challenge of playing against so many guys, a
Mm-hmm.
deep rotation like this. And he said something like, yeah, it keeps them fresh and we got to be aware of that. But, they all kind of play the same. We know what their team does, insinuating that he didn't seem to feel, and this is my interpretation of what he was saying, but I think I'm right. He didn't seem to feel that what you're talking about was going to be a particular issue. That,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we know they play a lot of bigs, but they all kind of do the same things. Well, no, they don't. No, they don't. And Michigan State, this is what we've said, is one of the strengths that has emerged for this team is that roster is built in a way that game to game Izzo can alter what he's doing in terms of the distribution of minutes, never eliminating anybody, but some guys' minutes might rise, some might fall. And it has to do with how they're playing, but it also has to do, of course, because how they're playing is sometimes a function of what the other team does. It usually is to one extent or another. And so it's not accurate to say, well, all Michigan State's bigs play the same way. You're absolutely right. Cooper is by far the best dive threat, but Zapala can do that a little bit too. And
Right.
as you say, Kohler, rarely. Not never, but rarely. On the other hand, Kohler's a guy you got to worry about, especially at this stage with the way he's been shooting lately from three. You have to be cognizant of him. He's
Mm-hmm.
also the one guy they'll throw the ball into in the post who might actually try to do something with it to score. You know, um, they present different abilities and capabilities on the defensive end. They all play a little bit differently, right? Cooper's the most mobile. Zapala is arguably the best pure post defender. And, Jax is maybe a little, he's not as mobile as Coop, but, kind of is in a halfway house between those two guys in some ways. So athletically, I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, and that's just the bigs. The guards, it's the same thing. They all
Hmm.
present different challenges, and they can all bring a slightly different thing, or sometimes a much different thing, to the table. Cohen Carr does not do the same things Frankie Fiddler does. I mean, it sounds obvious, but if you're going to sit there and you're going to tell me, well, we're just worried about how their team plays because they all kind of do that. No, and
Yeah,
maybe they found that out tonight. I don't know. Um, but I think that that's definitely something that uh, I noticed in terms
yeah.
of what their guys were saying. And they were, it wasn't, I don't want to set the wrong tone. It wasn't intended to be dismissive. I just
Right.
think maybe they didn't get through fully, you know, to their guys about what the challenge was really going to be like, because I think you're absolutely right. Michigan State presents a scouting nightmare. Izzo has oftentimes this year dusted off the line, which he tells as a joke, where he says, look, I know the other team can't know who we're going to because I don't know who we're going to night tonight, right? And it
Yeah,
is a funny line, but it's also 100% true. And if you think that doesn't present scouting challenges for an opponent, you're crazy. Of course it
yeah.
does. You
Yeah.
can't know. I
No,
mean,
I mean, we did the gutter. Who do we keep in the gutter for the other opposing team on Michigan State? I don't know.
that's the thing. If we were doing it, dealing with Michigan State, that would be a total crapshoot from night to night.
We can't figure out who
Completely.
rebounds, much less that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be totally flip a coin up in the air, throw a dart at a board kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, to that point, let's talk about a couple of individual performances tonight. Let's start with Jeremy Fears because I think he looked a little rough at times, but finished with 10 points, 4 for 8 from the field after really a shaky start, 2 for 4 from three. Well, one was banked in, but whatever. Missed his free throw. Had a board, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, a steal. Played 23 minutes. Not a His second half was much better, and
yes, yes,
you definitely saw a guy who just sort of got a little bit of confidence.
yep.
And I think he'll build on this. We don't know. We'll have to see. But he's been slowly getting better the last few games to the point where now, he just has not had any confidence in that shot. And the fact that he hit two long ones, one was, a good three and the other was like a banked in. But that's got to help him. And it was a good game for him.
He also had what I thought was a fantastic play where he went right through Vlad Golden's
Yes,
chest
exactly. Why he
and
didn't do that
converted.
earlier, I don't know. It was driving me crazy. But yes.
That is something Jeremy Fears can do more or less at will, I
Yeah.
think. And he has at times this year. We've seen it. It's certainly not been absent, but lately you haven't seen as much of it. As the confidence in the jumper has gone awry, you haven't seen as much of him being aggressive, just looking to get to the hole and make it happen, because he can do that. As I say, I think he can do it with regularity. I'm really proud of him, and I'm not surprised. There's
Yeah.
been
And
some discussion lately, last few weeks. You know how it goes. There's got to be a whipping boy, right?
there's
Has to be
someone's the
one.
problem, even though you're winning.
Has to be a problem. And
Yeah.
lately, Jeremy has kind of gotten his turn in some quarters of Spartan land.
Right.
And I made this point to someone the other day. Said, you know what it reminded me of, and there are differences here, but it, if you go way back, I can remember Keith Appling, his sophomore year, not his senior year when he had the injury, the wrist injury, and struggled to shoot because of that. His sophomore year, he hit the skids as a
Yes.
shooter late in the season, to the point that when MSU faced Rick Majerus, who was coaching St. Louis at that time, in a second round NCAA tournament game, Majerus it was way worse than what we've been seeing with Jeremy, with guys playing off him. He was just begging, basically giving Keith any jumper he wanted. And Keith just wouldn't take. His head was just screwed up because of it. He rallied from that. Now, Keith Appling, as a high school player, is one of the best pure scorers I've ever seen in my life. So it was not surprising that he would rally. But you know what? Jeremy Fears was pretty damn good with the jumper earlier this year.
Yeah,
Didn't take
that
a ton of
exactly.
them,
Hmm.
but it was not a problem. And so he's hit, the freshman wall. I know people think, oh, he's a redshirt freshman. It's different. Not really. He's never played this many games, and certainly not this many games at this level of intensity in his life. So it is new for him. He's a first year player in terms of that stuff.
Yeah, and
And
he's coming off an injury. That can't You can't
yeah,
discount that too.
coming off an injury, but also too in the middle of this, coming off an illness.
Yeah, the flu. It's
So
getting everybody.
right in the midst of
Feel your
this
pain,
period where
Jeremy.
he's been off a little bit. So you got to keep all that in mind. I had zero worries about Jeremy Fears. He does too many important things for this team. We know this. He's the best point guard they've got in terms of pushing tempo, although I will say Trey Holloman is making major strides lately, and that's a great thing to see. But Jeremy is still the guy that I think is the engine that makes that go better than anybody. He's just a nightmare for an opponent to deal with as a defender,
Yes.
especially when he's at his best. He can just blow things up and do it while not taking chances. I mean, it's just letter perfect for Michigan State. And I think as a leader and his toughness, that stuff matters too. So even as a freshman, it matters. He is one of the voices on this team. There's no doubt about that. So I had no doubt that he is going to come around from this. You would hope that tonight gives him even more confidence to get that sorted now, as opposed to, well, we got to struggle through this and then next season you figure he'll be more confident after another off season of being able to work on his jumper and all of that. But
Right.
Jeremy Fears is a very good player right now. He is going to be a great one, in my opinion, before he is done. And it was great to see what he did and how he responded tonight. And I agree with you. The second half was a lot better than the first. I think the second half he was outstanding.
Yeah. Well, and then the obvious probably player of the game is Jace Richardson. He was able to keep them in the game in contact in the first half, second half as well. So he finished with 21 points, 7 to 12 from the field, 2 for 4 from three, 5 for 6 from the line, 6 rebounds, 2 of them offensive, 3 steals, no assists or turnovers, but he played 33 minutes, well earned, deserved minutes, and he was sensational. I mean, for a freshman.
Uh,
I don't even know if you had to add the 4 freshmen, but that just
you
even makes
don't.
it more impressive.
You don't. It does. It absolutely does. You're right, but you don't. He was the best player on the floor
Yeah,
tonight. But and I agree with you. He probably is Michigan State's player of the game because the 6 rebounds helps tilt it. But Trey Holloman was real close.
well, Trey had 18 points, 6 for 10
That's
from the
right.
field, 3 for 4 from three, 3 for 4 from the line, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, and played 25 minutes.
Yeah, those two guys were neck and neck for me. I'd probably
Yeah,
agree with you. I'd give it to Jace by a hair. Um, so we'll start with Jace
sure.
because they were different games. Jace was Mr. Consistency. I believe he had 11 in the first half, 10 in the second.
Yep, I think so.
So he was there the whole 40 minutes. He got off to a great start. I mean, I think he had 7 of the first 9 or 7 of the first 11, something like that. And just from there, it was just steady basketball. And I just love watching that kid play. And I'm hoping to God we get to see it one more year.
It'd be nice. Well, we'll see.
Um, but just, I think he was the guy more than anybody else that I thought made the difference in this game. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the keys. But Michigan did not play quite as much zone as I expected them to,
Hmm.
but they played enough of it. And
Yeah,
I thought Jace was the guy with his ability to knife into those gaps, get himself into the lane. He even had a play where he just kind of hung in the lane, and it might have been Carson. It was somebody on the baseline who found him. This was later in the game, in the second half.
yeah,
Found him for an easy, 4 foot flip.
yeah.
Um, he got himself into the gaps consistently. And I think that had something to do with why Michigan maybe didn't go as heavily with the zone as they did, because Michigan State wasn't incredible against it, but they were good enough.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I give
and
a lot.
from a rebounding standpoint too, we talked about
Yeah.
they're giving up some rebounds that way too.
Yep, absolutely. That was another. You're absolutely right. That's another reason why I think they couldn't hang with it as much as maybe they had wanted to, or as much as we thought they might.
Yeah.
Um, but there's that. So Jace was Mr. Consistency, and then Trey had half his points in what, a minute and change.
He was like a Vinnie Johnson, like a microwave there,
It
right?
was incredible, and that was honestly, I think you can point to that flurry, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked back to see what the time frame was. I
That
believe that
ended the
was
game because they went up like 8 or 9 with him and they never really got under
no,
four, I
but
think, after that.
no, what I mean is it came at about the roughly around the 8 minute ish mark. And you're right. It took that game. I think it was a 2 point game, and it took it to 11.
Yeah.
Now, give Michigan credit. Michigan came right back and scored 8 in a row.
Hmm.
And I think one big moment that is going to get overlooked a little bit is Vlad Golden had a chance for a 3 point play, missed a free throw, would have cut it from 3-2, and it felt to me like the momentum just died. I want to say maybe Jace's bucket I was talking about a second ago might have come right after that. It was
It
in
might have,
that
yeah.
sequence for sure, where
Hmm.
Michigan State just hung in there, took that final last gasp body blow from Michigan, and then pushed to the finish line. But going back to it, where they got out to that big lead that they never relinquished was that flurry from Trey. And that was just a guy in a zone, feeling it, and there was there's
He was
nothing you
feeling it
can
all right.
do. There's nothing you can do. Now, Michigan people are going to say, "Well, where he hadn't done that all year." And that's
No,
true.
that's,
More or less, it's true. He might have had a flurry or two like that, but
yeah.
his 3 point shooting on the season has been well below what I think any of us expected. He's had a tough year shooting the three. But we all know because we've seen it that
Right.
that's in him. And it's you keep saying, I mean, I feel like one of those guys always said, well, the stock market can stay irrational longer than your
Say
bank
solvent. Yeah,
accounts can
right. Yeah.
stay solvent, right?
Yeah.
And and that's how I felt about Michigan State's 3 point shooting all year. It's like they're not this bad. They're not. We can point to a number of guys. I watched a lot of things I shouldn't watch this week. I watched one Michigan site, the Michigan on three site, so the Spartan Mag equivalent. It's called the Wolverine. Terrible, terrible place. You really shouldn't venture there unless you're a glutton for punishment.
They thank
But
you for doing us a favor for going in there all
but
by
I
yourself.
watched some of their podcast. It
Okay.
was today or yesterday where they were previewing this game. And one of these jokers said, yeah, Jaden Akins can't shoot. I mean, that was the reason Michigan stopped recruiting. Well, they didn't stop recruiting him. Stop with that nonsense. They wanted he and Kobe Buffkin. You're out of your goddamn mind. That didn't happen. And secondly, Jaden Akins has been a very good shooter in his career at Michigan State, right up until this season. And the
Yeah.
numbers prove it. But that's what we're saying here. We've seen Jaden Akins be 40% plus over the course of a season from three. We saw Trey Holloman do it last year. Um, it's Frankie Fiddler, career 36% shooter from three.
Yeah.
So there are guys who are nowhere close to what reasonable expectations would have been this year. But that doesn't change the fact that they are capable of doing it. That it probably is a matter of time until water finds its level. The problem is that matter of time might have to be next year for the guys who are coming back.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? You at a certain point, you just kind of have, and I accept it. There's no way we'd ever talk about 3 point shooting as anything but an issue for this team because that's what they've been through the course of, whatever we're at, 80% of a season, 90% of a season.
Hmm.
That's what's been the case. But I mean, were you shocked to see Trey Holloman hit those shots? I'm not. I know he can do it. You don't expect it going into any given game that you're going to see it, but you look back at it and say, well, is that it wasn't Carson Cooper hitting three triples in a row. That's a guy who's done this stuff.
Right.
And he obviously you could see it in him with the last one especially, where you knew the shot was coming because he got Wolf matched up in a
Oh yeah.
switch. It's like, okay, the combination of having hit those first two and then getting switched on to Wolf, or getting Wolf switched on to him, I mean, You knew it was going up. And Wolf tried. He tried to
Yeah.
contest it, and he's 7 feet tall, so he's got some wingspan. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that was obviously that was a huge segment in the game. But the other thing I want to give Michigan State credit for is what I just mentioned a second ago: the fact that Michigan came back from that 8 in a row, got made it right back into a one possession game, and then Michigan State gave them the Heisman, said, "That's all, boys. You're not getting any more." And that was it. Ball game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Then they kind of stretched out to two or like, well, basically 6 points almost the rest of the game. And then till the very end, they just kind of
That's
separated completely.
and that is that last 5 minutes and change is where you saw what you were talking about,
Yeah.
where Michigan State just said, "Okay, we're going to continue to impose our will against you, and we'll see if you can keep fighting back." And Michigan gave them the Roberto Duran, no mas, and that was it.
The only other person I'll point out, I mean, there are a lot of good, I mean, I think um, Cone Carr with just 4 points, 2 for 3 from the field with missed both his free throws, which is kind of strange for him. But four rebounds, three of them offensive early in the game, really kind of helped set the tone, I think, for the team, um, and played really good defense for the most part. I think on Wolf, I think he really
Yep,
did a really nice job on
100%.
him. How Trey Holloman can throw a lob too high for Cone Carr multiple times. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think I could throw a ball high
yeah,
enough to where that car couldn't pull it down. But
yep,
anyway,
yeah. No, you're right. I want to echo what you just said about the job he did playing Wolf. I thought they might play he and Fiddler a little more on Wolf, but I want to give credit to Michigan State's bigs. Wolf had an okay game, right? He had 11 points. I think this is what's really impressive. He had 8 assists and only 2 turnovers. So he did
yeah.
not have the meltdowns that you often see. He also had 7 rebounds. So he did a lot of good things, but he was only 5 for 11 from the floor. He didn't get to the line, no free throw attempts.
Yeah.
So,
There
and
the
you
stats are
saw
on the screen
him.
for you.
What's that?
Stats are on the screen for everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep
And you
going. Yeah.
and you saw him try to back Cohen down a time or two. There was one
Yeah.
possession where he did it on the baseline, and Cohen just a beautiful contest. Didn't let him get quite as deep as he wanted to, and a great contest on the shot, which we know he can do because
Hmm.
Cohen's superhuman. He can get up and make up that 6 inch height difference, right? Um, and Wolf missed it wide right. Wasn't really even close. Barely grazed the rim. That was an example of the job that Cohen Carr did. It's funny to say on a night where the guy has 8 assists and only 2 turnovers, and I didn't think Michigan State was quite as aggressive with him on the perimeter as I thought they might be, and as I thought they maybe needed to be.
Hmm.
But they didn't let him take that game over. And again, it's funny to say a guy who had 8 assists, but I never felt like he was just dominating that game,
No.
you
If
know?
anything, you
Or
felt Golden was that way a little bit more than
yeah,
Wolf.
Golden inside definitely, and some of that was a result of what Wolf was doing, setting him up.
Yeah, sure.
So, but and I didn't feel the Area 51 nonsense tortured them. They got some stuff off it, but it wasn't destroying Michigan State. It obviously didn't, you know, scoreboard, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
Right.
it didn't win them the game. But yeah, Cohen, I thought a lot of guys played Wolf.
Hmm.
You had Jackson Kohler, Frankie Fiddler took a turn on him. Cohen played him a fair amount. Carson Cooper got him. Zapala got him a few possessions. They threw at Booker guarded him. They threw probably 5 or 6 guys at him at various
Yeah.
points. And I'm not even accounting for the switching. And I think they held their own. He didn't have a bad game by any means, but I don't think he dominated. I think Michigan probably they would have taken the assist and turnover numbers, but I think they would have figured they probably needed 18, 19 out of him as opposed to 11.
Yeah,
He never
and
really got going as a scorer.
yeah, well, so he is the player that we selected as Michigan State need to keep in the gutter in order to win this game. Brought to you by the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters. So it's almost spring, friends. Make sure that you head on over to the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters. You can find a way to contact them on our support page at tffinots.com/support. There you can get a hold of Greg or Kurt, whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state of Michigan. They can hook you up and take their professionals and fix your gutters, whether it's cleaning them out, repairing them, replacing them, whatever needs to be done, they can do it. Whether it's your home or your business, They can get the job done. And as a listener to the show, you get 10% off just by mentioning Final Four when you get your estimate. They do fantastic work. They've taken care of my wife's office, my house. Uh, they get on the ladder so you don't have to. And they get out in the weather right now, even though it's February and it feels cold and there's snow on the ground. It depends where you are, I suppose. But they'll come out and do and take care of things. So make sure you contact them. And so player that to keep on in the gutter was Danny Wolf. And as Rod mentioned, 5 for 11 field, 1 for 4 from three, no free throws, 11 points, 7 rebounds, 2 of them offensive, 8 assists, 2 turnovers, no steals, and 1 block. And he was, although I think it's probably fair to say he wasn't kept in the gutter, he certainly
Right.
was not as impactful as they needed, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to me, and you saw hints of it a couple of times, but not as much as they probably wanted. Where he's been really tough lately is where they'll run pick and roll stuff with him and he'll fake a handoff and then
Mm-hmm.
take it down the lane to finish. And you did see evidence of this a couple of times in this game where he finishes plays that don't look like he's going to convert, right? He
Yeah.
uses his wingspan to kind of get the right angle off the backboard. And it at least to my eyes, oftentimes it looks like, wow, that's not a good shot. And then it goes, and it's not luck. I mean,
Yeah.
he does it with regularity. He really uses that rare combination of his handle and his size. Because a 7 footer, at the rim like that, you've got that ability to extend your arm and extend where the ball is, and you can finish plays that don't look like they should be easily finished.
Right.
And he's got a knack for that. And he didn't get very much of that against Michigan State. He didn't get rolling downhill very much. Couple
Yeah.
of
They did a
times
good
here
job.
and there, not much.
They did a good job stopping his drive with help, but not long enough that they
Yep.
got off their man, usually too long, and giving up open shots. And the other thing about Danny Wolf is, I mean, he did all that damage, but it took him 36 minutes. He played almost the entire game.
Yep.
You definitely saw the fatigue at the late. He was really not as effective late in that
Hundred
game as he
percent.
was
Hundred
earlier, which,
percent.
again,
Missed
just further
missed a
credit to
couple
the,
shots late, a couple
yeah.
jumpers, and they were in catch up mode anyway. So
Yeah.
it's, he wasn't taking a lot of time with those, but missed those. I think some of Michigan State's, he's their best rebounder.
Hmm.
And so some of Michigan State just tattooing them late on the offensive boards, that was a big deal. And
Yeah.
I think some of that was his exhaustion, probably Golden's exhaustion as well. But yeah, that's again, and I want to go back to one point you made quite a while ago, which I think is important, and I don't think I dealt with it. We're now, what are we? February 20, was 20th or 21st today?
It's the
Wherever
20th,
we
I
are.
think, still the 20th. Yeah.
Okay, February
As we're
20th.
recording this. Yeah.
February 20th. We are late enough in the season now that guys who are regularly playing, and I'm pretty sure both of those guys, and actually most of Michigan's starters, period. Let's say all their top 6 guys, especially the guys at the top, which Wolf and Golden would both be,
Right.
are probably averaging at least in the low 30s, I would think,
You would think.
in
Yeah.
terms
I
of
have to
minutes.
look,
I
but
haven't
I bet
checked
that's
it, but I
probably
got to
right.
believe that's true.
I'm sure Donaldson too. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, Donaldson as
Hmm.
well. Um, that does take a toll. You touched on that, and you're right. It's not even just, oh, the last 5 minutes of the game, it's happening because it's been 35 minutes of this, and they don't. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But there's also the cumulative total. It's like, and especially the way the Big Ten is right now. Now, Michigan had a break coming into this game. They last played on Sunday.
Right.
So they
Yeah.
had
A
an
couple
advantage
days.
over Michigan State in that regard. But
Mhm.
look, everybody's had their time because of the necessity of it with Big Ten scheduling, that you're going to face some games where you're on short turnarounds, maybe like 3 games in a row. It will happen to everybody. I'm sure without analyzing Michigan's schedule, I'm guessing they've had moments like that. But it's different when you got a bunch of guys that are playing 34 minutes a game and a bunch of guys who are maybe playing 8, 9 less than that.
Yeah.
There is a cumulative effect. Believe it. I know some people want to discount that, but it's especially true when you consider that Michigan is a team that plays fast. Michigan
Right.
State does too, but Michigan State does it with a much deeper rotation. So guys aren't logging those heavy action minutes the same way that Michigan's roster is. And so that's part of it too. When we see other teams, now We're actually not going to see it again because all four teams Michigan State's playing, including, God help me, I'm saying this, Wisconsin, actually play reasonably fast these days. So, but
Strange
when you,
times.
the old, you got that right, but the old school Wisconsin, when people, it used to drive me crazy when people say, well, Bo Ryan's playing four guys, 33 minutes or more. Why can't Izzo do that when they be bitching about Izzo going to an eighth and ninth man? I say the style of play is very different. And when you play a slow paced game, guys can play more minutes and it's not going to take as much a toll. But with Michigan, they play fast, as we talked about in the preview. So you can say I think with some accuracy, hey, that's something to watch as they head to the finish line. How much do they have left in the tank? And do we start seeing these? They've been very, very good in Big Ten play, at least in close games. Can they continue doing that, assuming they have more? Because that's where you start to see it show up is in those tight games. Do you have enough energy just to make winning plays when it matters?
Yeah. To that point, my dad's team is Drake, which we've talked about plenty of times in the show, and they have the number 1 and the number 3 minute players in the country at 39 and a half and like
Yeah,
39 minutes.
that's
But they
crazy.
also are this one of the slowest teams at the slowest pace in the country. I
There you
think
go.
they always shoot with like 4 or 5 seconds left in the shot clock. So just the way it works.
Yeah,
And so
John
they can,
Beeline used to be able to get away with it
yeah,
too because his
sure.
teams played very slow paced basketball and he could play guys heavier minutes. He didn't have to go as deep, but it's if you want to play fast, it's tough to do it that way. And I look, Dusty May is trying. I mean, he's not. It's not like he's going out there Ben Johnson, 6-man army style and trying to do this. He is playing a bench, but he can't. It's not even close to what Michigan State does, and so there is a difference.
Yeah. His bench is different too, right? I mean, that's just,
To
that's,
add that too, it's different
yeah,
quality, but and that limits what he can do. Right?
sure.
It might very well be the case as we see him, assuming he stays in Ann Arbor. Wink, wink. Um, we we
Mr. Foreshadowing here.
we are go well. I if I had to bet, I would probably bet that this is the end of the Indiana adventure. But unless there's a clause saying he can't go to Indiana, I don't see anything that stops it.
Yeah.
But anyway, as we see his program develop, it will not surprise me if he tries to get somewhere around where Izzo is, where he's got the ability to at least play, say, 8 or 9 guys relatively heavy minutes. He can't do that. Roddy Gale and Shetter are really the only reserves that play,
Yeah.
you would say were significant minutes. You saw tonight, Pippen got a cameo, Kason got a cameo. That's about it.
Yeah.
It's really a 7-man rotation in a practical sense.
All right. So then I will move on to Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you need clean windows, which who doesn't if you live in a home or if you have a business, make sure you call the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They can clean everything up. They'll do a fantastic work, super great quality. And, Michigan State cleaned the glass well tonight. The Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids will clean your glass great. So give them a call. You can head on over to your support page. As always, the Final Four is on theschedule.com/support. And as a listener to the show, 15% off the work you can do. They can get up the ladder, so get out right now. It's February, but it's still plenty of time to get all that stuff done, get a head start on your neighbors. Make sure you start a trend in your neighborhood. So head on over to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. All right, so cleans the glass best. You were ahead 13-8, and today was really a runaway. You had Kohler; he was in foul trouble. He finished with 4 rebounds. Cooper had 8, and that was really all I needed because I think Zapala had a couple, and Carr had I think 4. So I
Well, yeah,
needed to
not a
bank some up.
runaway. What is that, 10-8?
No, it was like 12-6.
No, Kohler had 4, didn't he?
Kohler had 4. Zapala had
I didn't. Oh,
1.
you had Carr. Okay,
Yeah,
my
you had
bad. My
5,
bad.
and I had 12.
Yes.
That's a runaway, my friend.
No,
That's not even
actually,
close.
actually, it's even worse. Apollo only had 1.
Yeah, he had 1. Yeah, 12-5. That was
All right.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway, so I needed it. I need about a couple more in a row. So anyway,
yeah,
we'll get back. I guess we can talk about rebounding later, but
yeah,
it was a good performance from Michigan State on the boards, which is what we'd hoped.
yes,
And
absolutely.
all right, so let's talk
The
about the keys
only
of the game.
bad thing that happened all night was that
Oh,
the
you know,
squeegee squad.
it's it's
So
so
the
funny because
squeegee squad competition,
I'm watching.
not the squeegee squad. Let me
I'm
correct
watching it
that.
with my wife, my daughter, and they're always asking me, "Who do you have?" And I'm like, "I don't remember." I knew, I I knew I had Cooper and I knew I had Kohler. I'm like, I don't know. And then I don't, honestly, I don't really care that much, just as long as we get the rebound. I'm not too
Right.
worried about it. The
Right.
games, they're always asking me. So fortunately, they remember usually, so they can keep me straight. So I at least know who to cheer for, who I need, Kohler to rip the ball away, or for someone to rip the ball away
Right.
from to get the rebound from it. Nudge Printing is the longest sponsor and a great sponsor for the show. I'm actually don't have Nudge Printing on today, but they have a huge line of apparel, all kinds of things from the state of Michigan, about any school you can think of in Michigan, except one critical school that we don't need to have you buy
Yeah.
apparel from, and that's the University of
Wonder who
Michigan.
that is.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want a winning apparel, head on over to Nudge Printing. You can get it at nudgeprinting.com. And as a listener show, 20% off your order. I need to get my daughter said, "Oh, hey, I need some stickers." So I for a laptop computer, so I got to get some stickers at Nudge, and I still need to buy that shirt for my wife that I keep forgetting. So I will do that probably after I'm done here recording. So head on over to Nudge Printing. You won't regret it. 20% off, like I said, if you type in Final Four just as one word at checkout when you get your clothes. All right. So the first key of the game was, do they understand? And that was with reference to the fact that Michigan has basically no players who have been in this rivalry outside of Burnett and, Jace Howard, who doesn't play. And Cheddar's played a couple times and been embarrassed. So I don't know. What I
Um,
think they do. I think they understand now.
they understand now. Yes. And I do think you know, the atmosphere of Breslin and maybe the stakes too are going to make that a very difficult task, but I do think that they learned something tonight. And I'll give them this. I thought early when Michigan State got out to that quick lead
Yeah, 16
that
8. Yep.
it looked to me like, oh yeah, they don't get it.
Yeah.
Like I thought I saw evidence of that. To their credit, they steadied the ship, they punched right back, and I didn't look. I didn't think that was a game where you would say, "Boy, that team just had deer in the headlights."
No.
Like there have been games in this rivalry occasionally. I can think the most obvious example to me
In the 50-point
is
game.
well that one, but I that was such a Michigan was a bad team and Michigan
Yeah.
State was a
Right.
national champion. So
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
setting that one aside. Where it was two good teams that in theory were evenly matched, where I saw that, and it wasn't that they didn't understand it because they had a bunch of veterans, but it was just they clearly um, were not ready. Was
Yeah.
when Michigan, what I think might have been ranked number one in the country. It was 2012-13, so it was winter of 13, and Michigan and Indiana were getting a ton of hype, and Michigan State was, certainly recognized as a legitimate title threat and Final Four threat too, but we're getting a little less hype. And Michigan came into Breslin. I've never seen Breslin like that before or since. I've seen
Yeah.
Jenison like that, not Breslin. It was, they were out for blood. That crowd, and then as a result, that team. And Michigan did look in that game like they were just shocked by the tenacity, by what Michigan State was bringing to them in terms of how ferocious they were, and they just couldn't withstand it. They just had no shot. That did not happen tonight. What I do think happened, and maybe the lesson that you could say would be there to be learned, is guys, it's going to take 40 minutes,
Yeah. Right.
not 30, not 35. It's going to take 40 minutes of competing our asses off. And I mean, we can point to several moments down the stretch of that game, the biggest one being the possession where Michigan State got like two or three offensive rebounds in a row and
Just finish the
basically
game.
killed
Yeah.
the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
That you just say, hey, that you can't do that. You can't get out competed. Jaden Akins whipped their big men for an offensive rebound in that stretch. That can't happen.
Can,
And I think that's the thing. If I were Dusty May, and I'm guessing he is one way or another going to deal with that and use that to show his team it takes a little more. You know, you
yeah.
they did. I thought they did a decent job most of the way, considering they don't have guys that have experience in this thing, but they couldn't finish the job. They didn't have enough to finish the job.
Can I ask you a question? Because I am really confused. We've had three straight games Illinois, Purdue, and now Michigan, where the team that's behind by not like it's not like a 18-point deficit. It's like 2, 3 possessions,
Okay.
2.5 minutes left. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Why they didn't foul?
Why they're not fouling and trying to
I
extend
don't
this game?
know.
I,
I
I
don't
just
have an
don't
answer
understand. Well,
for
they
you.
just, but it's like, I don't, I just am, obviously, I'm speechless. I just don't understand
I
why the
agree.
team just gives
I
up. It just
agree.
is weird. At home.
Now,
Two of those
what
are home games. I don't,
it's possible that in Michigan, keep in mind, the problem Michigan had too is at least at some point down the stretch when they were facing that, they also had a foul to give. So they had to commit one to even get to the point.
but then you're
And
still
they
1-1, right? That gives you the best
right.
chance at
But
coming
that's what I'm
back.
saying. They had you would have expected a quicker response. In fairness to their coaching staff, you can't know what they told their guys and what actually happened. Because although I know people don't believe this, it's not a video game. They're human beings, and they're young human beings who get distracted, who lose their minds. Jeremy Fears on that play right before halftime.
Right, right.
That happens. That's reality in college basketball. And so we don't know whether Michigan staff told them, "Hey, we got a foul," and they just didn't do it. I don't know, but I can't explain it. You're absolutely right, and you're right. We've seen it now with regularity in 3 straight games, where you would expect, and the last two guys, especially, well, no, all three of Underwood, Painter, and May are considered to be, in a general sense,
Yes,
heavy analytics guys,
exactly.
right? So you would think they would be the guys before anybody else would be saying, hey, the right thing to do here is lengthen this game. Just
I,
drag it out. We commit fouls quickly, we put them at the line, and we try to preserve as much clock as we can that way to give ourselves a chance. I agree. I don't have an answer for it.
yeah.
It would be, but I don't think any of these guys got asked the question. And maybe Dusty May did tonight. We haven't seen the post game pressers yet, but as we jumped right into this, but yeah, it's a good question. I don't have an answer. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know. Maybe the mental fatigue is too much for the coaches.
No,
I mean,
no,
I don't know much about analytics, but I'm pretty sure if you never have a chance to shoot the ball, you will not win.
You're
So
you are correct. Well,
I don't.
what analytics would absolutely tell you is when you're down multiple possessions, what do you need to happen?
You need
Have more
possessions.
possessions. Right.
Yeah.
That your math is going to improve the more possessions there are when you are down because it gives you more opportunity. You have to score. Whatever the other team does, you got to stop them too. But there's no doubt about it. When you're behind, you need to score.
Yeah.
So you need the more possessions you can get, the better, which would seem to indicate you should foul early and often. And
Uh,
you're right. These guys, when Michigan State went through that possession where they kept getting those offensive rebounds, it was just the clock just kept melting
yeah. It was.
on them. It was incredible.
It was
And
like
we've
you have a
seen
couple
similar
timeouts left. You
segments,
don't call timeouts in football, so you get the ball back. It's just like, yeah, just let them
right?
just run out the clock. It was just weird. I don't.
And we've seen similar segments in the two previous games. You're right.
I just don't get it. All right. Well, anyway, moving on to second key to the game was the boards. This is one where we thought Michigan State should have a pretty good advantage. Although Michigan is a very good offensive rebounding team, they're not a good defensive rebounding team. Actually, they're a pretty poor defensive rebounding team, especially Big Ten
Yep.
standards. Michigan State overall out rebounded them to 34-25. On second chance points, Michigan State had 15, Michigan with 8, and I think most of those were early. Michigan State had 14, the 14-7 edge on the offensive boards, and an offensive rebounding rate of 42.4% to Michigan's 26%. So, I mean,
Yeah.
win, 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 win.
Yep. And you could say, well, they padded it a little bit at the end, and they
All right, so
did,
it's 37%. It's
but it all
whatever.
right. It still
Yeah.
was decisive, and those rebounds helped them salt this thing away. They
Yeah.
weren't just, 10 seconds left and somebody was playing Moses Malone just tapping it against the backboard. They were meaningful offensive rebounds. Yeah, Michigan State tattooed them on the glass.
Yeah.
They did exactly what they needed to do. Um, as you pointed out earlier, there was a period in this game where Michigan State was not as active there as you might have liked, but that changed. And I'm very, very happy with the activity level and just the way that they imposed their will. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
Michigan got their asses handed to them on the boards, period.
Yeah. Well, I have been monitoring the chat, so boy, a lot of people kind of commenting stuff. Funny comment from Big Sus. Welcome, Dusty. All right, so move on to the third key to the game is
That's
the
right.
zone. He's not. He maybe his next game. He's a coach circles run Izzo. All right. So next is the
Yeah.
zone. We knew that Michigan would play. They played a decent amount of zone anyway, so it was not surprising they played some zone. And maybe it was a little effective in the first half when Michigan State couldn't buy a bucket. They were just missing every jump shot. They must have missed like 10 in a row or something, mid
Yeah.
range and
Yep.
kind of long range. And then after that, it just really wasn't very effective. And I think they were getting, like I said before, I think they're getting a little hurt on the offensive boards. And then Jace, like he also said, he just was impose his will and just kind of would cut through people even when they tried to cut down the lanes on him and
Yeah.
just force his way into the basket.
And you saw, I think what I give credit for Michigan State for are a couple things. One is I thought the ball man movement was a lot better than it was in that Indiana game. Wasn't
Hmm.
perfect, but you could see them moving that defense with more regularity, and that created gaps for them to get the ball into the gap via the pass or the dribble. And then you also saw Michigan State run some picks, which is legal to do. You can actually do that against a zone, and it can work, and that helped some too. But I thought that look, they were a long way from perfect against it. We have seen Michigan State teams dissect a zone better than they did tonight over the course of Tom Izzo's career. Many, many times we've seen it. No argument with that. But this was good enough. And I think that what I just mentioned added to what you said that unlike the Indiana game, it created vulnerabilities on the boards. And this time, Michigan State took advantage of some of that. I think that's what, in the end, led Dusty May to maybe not play as much zone as I thought he would. I really thought we might see 75%, 2-3, something like that. I mean,
Right.
obviously, it would depend upon how well Michigan State attacked it, but I really did it. I expected to see it sooner, and I expected to see more of it than we did. But I think there were maybe some reasons why that didn't happen that were based upon the things Michigan State actually did, which was a good sign. So I'm not going to say it was a triumph, but it was good enough.
Well, in some respects too, the shooting was not great, but Michigan State was 3 for 10 for three in the first half. Second half, 6 for 12.
Yeah.
Partly it was that was Trey's flurry too. But if once people are hitting outside shots, there's the risk, especially when you're behind, you can get a lot further behind if you're not careful too. And so it clearly wasn't
Well,
effective,
you're
right? I
you're
mean, that was
right
main.
about that.
That's my.
I think that it but then again, I want to say they played some zone during that segment where they cut it from 11 to 3. I think they did.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
I
they
don't,
kind
that
of
would be
switched back and forth a lot. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes it was occasionally effective, and then occasionally Michigan State would kind of shoot out of it or find like dissect it a couple times. So I
yep.
don't know.
They did it. They did enough of it. And again, the rebounding vulnerabilities. I think they were as that game went along. I think that coaching staff was probably rightly very concerned about that. Say, hey, we
Yeah,
we can't give up second chances, and if we play too steady, give them too steady of a zone look, they're going to start hammering us.
yeah.
I suspect that thought process entered into the equation for them.
I think it's probably best just to kind of go back and forth and just try and confuse the offense, for
I think
Michigan
that's
State.
what
So
they were
that's
doing.
yeah,
Try and keep Michigan State out of a
off
rhythm.
yeah off balance. All right, so the fourth key to the game was turnovers. Michigan State with 11. It's eight of them in the first half, or maybe 10 in the first half. I think they might have. I'll have to
I think it
check.
was 9. I think it was 9.
I
It
feel
was
like they had
9
one.
in the
Oh yeah, it was
first
nine
half,
because
2 in the
yep.
second.
And then so definitely much better job. Score reflects that too. Michigan with 15 turnovers, so not as bad as they could be, but it was not great. 18 to 11 points off turnovers edge for Michigan State. So probably not as much of an advantage as we kind of hoped Michigan State would have, but enough. 7 points in
But
a
you know,
12-point
I
game.
I, I made another post I made this week on the Spartan Mag board. I took a look at Michigan's 5 losses prior to this game, and I looked at offensive rebounds and turnovers because that's really where I've been saying this all year with regard to Michigan, but it's true in every game you play, but especially against a team like Michigan that really shoots the ball well and generally does a pretty good job at stopping the opponents from shooting well. That the key against them is, can you get those extra scoring chances? And the
Right.
way you do that is by getting offensive rebounds and by having Michigan commit more turnovers than you do. In 4 of their 5 losses, they were in the negative when you add those two things up. The one exception to it was the Oklahoma game, which was kind of a weird game. Oklahoma hit a lot of threes, if I recall correctly. Jeremy Fear's brother Jeremiah had a huge game.
Yeah, right.
All of that. But the other four losses they took, they were negative. And the two Big Ten losses they took before this against Minnesota and against Purdue, I think they were -7 in those two categories combined against Minnesota and -11 against Purdue. Well, what were they tonight? Michigan State, 14 offensive rebounds, Michigan 7. So that's -7 there. And 15 turnovers, Michigan, 11 Michigan State. That's -4. That's a -11.
Hey, can I give
Ball
you another
game.
crazy fact? 61 field goal attempts by Michigan State, 50 for Michigan. That's a difference of 11. What do you know? Math
How
works.
about that? Ball game. Ball game. That's it. Because
Yeah.
Michigan shot, you look at it, Michigan State shot, what did they shoot? They shot
46%.
46. Shooting was even
Yep.
from the floor overall. Michigan State had an edge from three.
Ha. Never would have expected
Michigan had
that.
a Michigan ended up with I think a one additional free throw made edge. Neither team shot free throws well.
Hmm.
But Michigan State wins going away. Why? -11.
Yep.
And I think for Michigan, that is the only number, if I'm a Michigan fan, that I'm fixated on game to game. Because if I can get that number close, if I'm positive, I'm probably winning fairly easily.
Hmm.
If I'm minimizing the difference, maybe I'm -3, I'm -2. I've still got a good shot to win because I'm probably going to outshoot the opposition in most games. But if I'm -11, see you later. It would have taken, when you look at that, it would have taken Michigan State being absolutely abysmal in terms of shooting the ball for this to be close. And it wasn't that kind of night, boys. Sorry.
Yep. All right. So the final key to the game was Area 51. That, of course, refers to Vlad Golden, number 50, Danny Wolf, number 1. They combined to Area 51.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, 32 points and 12 rebounds between the two of them. Pretty good. Can't say you shut them down by any means, but I didn't expect that. I think we talked about Wolf. I thought Wolf had a good game. He did not have a great game in my mind. Golden, on the other hand, 7 for 11 from the floor, 7 for 11 at the line. The free throw shooting, maybe they would have hoped for a little bit more. Only 5 rebounds. And the big negative for him was 4 turnovers. And he had some travel calls that were,
Yeah.
I think maybe all of them were travel calls. But overall, I think what you didn't come away from this game feeling is, wow, they just tortured us with that big on big pick and roll game. They got
Right.
some stuff done with it from time to time, but it didn't dominate the game, and that was the key. Michigan, and I think that's happened not just with Michigan State, but more regularly in games as the season has gone on. And I think it's not even that, oh, opponents have figured it out, they're shutting it down. It's just, it's no longer novel. So some coaches have figured out some ways to at least, not let it become a segment of the game that just destroys you. They're going to get some things done in that because they're two good players, but,
Yeah.
not enough. And
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is you look at Michigan scoring. Namari Burnett had a nice game. He had 12 points. That was it. Trey
Yeah.
Donaldson, 31 minutes, 3 points. Where were you, Trey? Not in this game, apparently. Reuben Jones, 2 points. Roddy Gale, 5. Those are all guys that played between 24 and 31 minutes. You got to get more than that out of your guy. Then the rest of it, Shutter had 5, Pippen had 2, and Kason had 1. You compare that to Michigan State's balance. I mean, when you look at Michigan State, 21 for Richardson, 11 for Akins, 10 for Fears, 18 for Holloman, 6 for Cooper, and then Carr 4, Booker 3. But I think the balance was a little better on the Michigan State side, and that was another way in which there was a gap between these teams.
Yeah. All right. Well, great win for Michigan State, and as we talked about earlier in the show, I mean, it is no stops. We knew this with the schedule. It was kind of softer at the beginning, and then it was going to be kind of intense at the end. But it's, not only was Michigan State kind of a softer schedule, in some respects, the other teams too, because they hadn't played each other a whole lot either. So, sort of the top of the Big Ten, just kind of by happenstance, is sort of playing each other at the end of the season, and
Yeah.
that's,
You'd almost think it was intentional, and there's no way,
no,
obviously,
no,
because
there's no way you could
you
know.
didn't,
Yeah,
none of these, other than Purdue, none of the teams that are really at the top were picked to be there.
right.
Michigan State, I think, was preseason
Five,
fifth where
five.
I
Yeah, I
had
think
them. I
so.
think I think I had them the same spot that the unofficial Big Ten poll had them. Uh, I'm pretty sure Maryland was beneath Michigan State.
Hmm.
I know Michigan was, and I know
Wisconsin was
Wisconsin
way down.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
So Purdue would be the only team that is in this upper tier mix that five losses or fewer that was expected to be there. So no, they didn't intentionally do this, but boy, has it worked out. And I'm sure the league, more so than the league, Fox and Peacock and CBS to some extent are all delighted
Oh,
because they're
sure.
getting. I mean, I don't want to. I want to add one more thing, and I'm pretty sure. Well, there's two numbers. One I know is accurate. The other I think is accurate. I'm pretty sure the Indiana game was a Peacock game. I think. I
Well, I
know the
was at the
two,
game, but I believe it was.
right.
I believe you're
I
right.
know the two West Coast games were. And I know that the two non-conference losses against Kansas and then against Memphis were both on ESPN. I believe Michigan State is unbeaten on any Fox affiliated network. So that would be Fox, as it was tonight, FS1, FS2, or the Big Ten network.
I think
Believe
played
they're
CBS
unbeaten.
too.
Um, yeah, and I don't think they've lost. I don't think they've lost.
Yeah.
Only one game on CBS, right? So they're
Hmm.
unbeaten on CBS. So basically, it's any game that's not on Peacock or ESPN. And I
Yep.
haven't looked at the schedule to see if they've got any more Peacock games the rest of the way.
They've got to
And
be
who
done with
knows what it'll
those.
mean for the NCAA tournament when they're on, Turner at
Right. That's all
CBS. But
CBS affiliates,
but
right?
for
Yeah,
now,
maybe
at
it bodes
least,
well.
they're unbeaten. Here's another one that's interesting. I don't take these are just for fun. I don't take a lot from this, but Michigan State, I think, is now either 19-0 or 20-0 when they win the race to 69 points. So
No.
when it's just something to kind of, and I've been doing it lately as the streak kind of continues. If they are the first team to 69, they're unbeaten. And it's most of their wins that's been the case, which is not surprising. You would expect those two things to correlate, but it's something to watch. Now, I believe both of the West Coast games, Michigan State didn't even get to 69. I know they didn't against UCLA, and I'm pretty sure they didn't against
Yeah, I
USC.
don't think so. I don't think it. Yeah.
Um, and they did. I don't believe they did against Indiana. So it's reflected in part. It's like, well, Michigan State wants to play a faster paced game, and so they're better when the game is played fast, and you get up above, in the 70s at least. But
Right.
it's an interesting thing, and the track record is remarkable for this season, at least to date. And it was true again tonight. Believe me, the game was competitive when it was still in the 60s, and that's when Michigan kind of made that last ditch run. And I was praying for the get to 69, get to 69, and they did. They actually went from 68 to 70 on a made two, and sure enough, it was a win. So just a
Yeah.
little something novel to keep your eye on as we hit these last few games.
Also, did you have on your bingo card Michigan State outshooting Michigan by 17% from three? Like 41 to
No,
20, 24%, 9 for 22 from the three. Michigan said 5 for 21. Actually, I would have guessed, had you told me Michigan State shot 22 threes, I thought that's a bad sign.
yes, I would agree with that. Never a good sign this season to see that many attempts, but
Never say never.
it was right. And look, if I'm a Michigan fan, am I irritated by that? Yeah, probably. Um, but other than the fears bank shot, those were not prayers. Those were
Right.
good looks. And maybe your defense was a little bit shoddy on those. And the other thing I would say is we all know this. Michigan State was way overdue for one of these. You can say that with conviction, even if you believe it's a bad shooting team. You can still say they're due for a game where they're just falling. They just
Yeah.
are. But I still think you could take some of that away. And I look at what happened on the boards and what happened with turnovers and say exactly the scenario that I would have outlined as the key to this game um, happened. It manifested. The threes were great. They gave Michigan State breathing room. We said that run by Trey really dropped the hammer on Michigan. But it was other things too. It was a lot of other things. It wasn't just, well, Michigan State went out and shot the lights out. I'm guessing you're going to hear some absolute morons say that. You probably will.
Oh yeah.
Pay them no mind.
Yeah. The game was not won or lost behind the 3-point line.
But,
Um,
again, on the other hand, Michigan State took them, Michigan State made them.
yeah.
Supposed to apologize for that?
No,
Get
it's not like they
lost.
shot 57, 60% or something from three. I mean, they
Right.
shot 40%. It's not
They were
like
competent. Yeah.
insane. Yeah.
They
Right.
were about,
Competent.
whatever, 11 points above their seasonal average in terms of percentage.
Yeah. And
Okay,
and that was
good
the
night.
strategy of
Not that
Michigan.
spectacular.
Right. That was Michigan's strategy. They're going to let them shoot, which I don't think
Right.
was a bad
Exactly.
strategy.
You give the opponent the shot. You got to live with the result, right?
Got to give them something, right? You can't stop everything. All right. Well, we're gonna stop it there before we get too long and revel in this for few more hours, I guess. And we'll be back for the Maryland pregame in a day or two because I think they play Wednesday, so we'll get that going in a little bit. So make sure again, head out over to our support page. Not only can you find links to all our sponsors, Nudge Printing, Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids, the Brothers Just Two Gutters, but also ways to support the show. If you're on YouTube, you're welcome to not only leave chat comments, but also you can give super chats and all kinds of other ways to get membership there, as well as going to our support page and getting membership through Patreon or Substack to help support the show if you like what we're doing and the content we provide. And in a couple games, we're going to have an anniversary coming up, and I'll leave you in suspense, Rod. So you'll have to, because I know you won't bother to try and count things up. So anyway, so until
Okay,
next time,
you,
everybody.
you got me confused.
Yes, exactly. The Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
We're still live, I assume.
We are live. Yes, we're still live. Everybody,
All
thanks
right.
so much for watching the live stream. For those of you still out here watching, and yeah, gotta love the Dusty Blow by Izzo. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure
Oh,
if that was Izzo or if that was
must be
Dusty.
yeah. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway,
I'm sure
the
there'll
whole
be
blow by
way
thing
too
is
much.
kind of overplayed right now. I think in general because I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like I think people are getting a little too caught up in all that sort of thing. Because with all this flu going around, I think people are trying to limit their contact with people too. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. All right, so there we go. We are just you and me now.
Okay.
All right,
So yeah, so it
so
is Wednesday. I just confirmed.